Thanks for joining me on episode 528 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Scott Brookins from scottbrookins.com. I encourage you to find the way to be inspired to start your dream business and find freedom. And one way to do that is to be inspired by this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mader.
And see, I know that about myself. I know that I need some time where I can be inside my own head in a positive way. Because I'm also of the personality that I can go inside of my own head in a very negative way. And so for me, that time-wasting activity that to someone else from the outside looking in, they go, that's completely non-productive time that doesn't do anything beneficial, is incredibly beneficial.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about developing your influence by stewarding your time, I talk with you about intentionality when it comes to the use of our time, why what you say is wasting time may not actually be, and how to know if it's wasteful or worshipful with your time.
As we talk about stewarding your time, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without just taking too long? Turns out you can't. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show just that quick. If you enjoy the show when you are ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon.
Time is one of those things that as human beings, we've been worried about, well, probably for all time. I mean, in the Bible, Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 through 17 says, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." I mean, this passage, and there's several others, is actually about using our time wisely. There's dozens of different examples from Christianity, from other philosophies, where we talk about measuring our time and using our time well. This is an area where I work with a lot of folks because I think as human beings, we often have this instinct that we're not using our time as well as we could, that we could do better at this. We're wasting time. We're not using our time to grow ourselves, to serve others. We look up and an hour has gone by and we've spent all of that time thumbing our way through Facebook or watching the latest Netflix show, and we'd look up and we just feel like we have nothing to show for the time that we've spent. We haven't gotten anything done. We haven't been productive. Maybe we've set all of the goals. We've done all our planning. We've done all of the things right that we talk about, and still things just aren't happening. We're not using our time to its best. We're not able to look up at the end of the day and say, my time has been well spent, and I feel that it is a worthy offering unto the Lord and the work that I'm supposed to be doing. Instead, we find ourselves tired, frustrated, and angry at ourselves, vowing to do better the next day. The truth is, when it comes to time, it is about being intentional. It is about setting the right things and the right intentions in place so that you can use your time well. Doing all of these things that we talk about, setting a plan, executing on that plan, reviewing it, revising it, setting good goals and breaking them down into very specific tasks. Those are important things to do when it comes to using our time with intentionality. But the other half of that is to actually execute on that, to do things that we're supposed to be doing, to do the things that we want to be doing, to do the things that we're called to be doing. And here's some funniness about that, some strangeness about that. See, oftentimes things that we consider wasteful of our time aren't wasting time. There are times at the beginning of this when I use the example of sitting down and binging on Netflix for several hours. The funny thing is, that could be a good use of your time. It could be some time to shift your brain down and recharge your batteries and get reset for a new day or a new set of tasks. And that also could be a complete and total time-wasting activity where you've sat down and you've wasted hours into the evening, into the night, and you have a hard time getting up the next day and being productive and doing things, and you're angry at yourself and you're regretful of the time you spent. It's not watching Netflix by itself that would be evil or wasteful in that situation. It's the intentionality behind it. Was this time that you intentionally set aside for recharging your batteries? I'm a big video game player, and it would be really easy for me to look at any time I spend playing video games as a complete and total waste of time. I've spent money on them, and when I play them, I don't get anything out of them other than relaxation, entertainment, and the ability sometimes to just disappear for a little while into a fantasy world that allows me to come back out of it and interact with people in a way that's healthier and that allows me to be friendly and kind and serve others well. And see, I know that about myself. I know that I need some time where I can be inside my own head in a positive way, because I'm also of the personality that I can go inside of my own head in a very negative way. And so for me, that time-wasting activity that to someone else from the outside looking in, they go, that's completely non-productive time that doesn't do anything beneficial, is incredibly beneficial. But you'll notice I reflected on it. I know the benefits that I get. I also know the dangers that I can easily get sucked into that world and use that world as a distraction that keeps me from coming out and interacting with others, that keeps me from doing the job that I'm supposed to be doing, that becomes the easy way out instead of doing the hard work. That's why just because someone else looks at your activity and says that's a complete waste of time doesn't necessarily mean that it is, but it also doesn't mean that it's not. You have to take a step back. You have to be intentional in your reflection on your use of time. That's one of the reasons that one of the things I teach is keeping records of how you're spending your time so that you have that data to be able to reflect on it and come back in and know what it is that you're actually doing and know why you're doing it. And then begin to build the systems and the processes and the habits to do the things that you intentionally want to do and to carve out those things that you don't want to do. It's the intention behind it that creates whether or not that time and that use of that time is wasteful, or whether using that time becomes one more example of worshipful use of your time, of sending the time up as something that is valuable for others, valuable for yourself, and even valuable for God. See, I don't think God wants us to work 24/7. I don't think God wants us to only do the hard things. I think God also wants us to enjoy our life. God also wants us to be able to look back and be recharged and be reset. That's one of the reasons that we're supposed to take a Sabbath, a day where we do not work. And yet even that day becomes work unto the Lord. But the work there is the work of intentionally resting and recharging your batteries. So I ask you to look at the time that you're using and not just assume that it's wasteful, but also to set some intentionality behind how you use your time and use it well. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of time, be sure to sign up for our Stewardship of Time Tips series by going to inspiredstewardship.com/time or texting 44222 Time Tips, and that'll get you our best tips on stewarding your time. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.